Okay, so really, Lucy asked me to talk about the curriculum and about how we've got everything covered. It was very kind of her to say that we've got everything covered. And really, when she came up with the title, 5 Ways to Prepare for Phase 2, I suppose one of the things that occurred to me was, what's Phase 2? Because Phase 2 is, you know, what is it exactly? Even the wheel has to evolve, even the wheel has to move. Sorry, I'm just moving my screen a bit. Even the wheel has to evolve. And e-learning have been around for decades. It's certainly something that I've been working on for ages, but that global pandemic hit us out of the blue. So our strategies were tested. They're not new, but they did need reshaping. And one of the things that we were looking at was about working towards September and what we're going to do. So I'm going to share with you now over the next few minutes is really some of our journey into how we worked through the pandemic and about how we're going to move forward now into September. And stage one really was to think about what just happened, you know, what really just hit us. I don't know if it was just me, but did everyone heave a sigh of relief in July, because the pressure was intense? But the question that I've got really is, what's happened to your learning platforms since the end of half term 6? We need to really have a think about what happened before we could move forward. So one of the things that I've done is I've audited our VLE, our learning platform, to have a look to see where we ended up. Certainly we all started off working in the same direction, but perhaps it didn't quite look the way that we were imagined back at that point, where it was all just one of those wonderful, nice to have things. So I've been looking through with faculties, auditing their work, checking what they've been doing, looking really to see what were the sorts of activities that generated the most emails in terms of I need help, looking to see what were the activities that had got the highest level of engagement. And we did have some pretty high levels of engagement with some of the students. We've been tracking every week as well. One of the big things for me was how easy is it to navigate the site? And I keep thinking about I talked to Lucy, and I know she'll smile when I say this, but I talked to Lucy about, you know, an 11-year-old sitting there with a mobile phone, and a lot of our families, English isn't their first language. So those students who are sitting there, not very confident with their English, with a mobile phone, what do these things actually look like? Staff have worked so hard and have produced so much stuff. I suppose my concern was, have they actually gone a little bit too far with some of their stuff? And also with the devices that the students have, although we've done technology surveys and we'll be doing technology surveys again, you know, I think as teachers we work on trying to pack as much as we can, as much information as we can into PowerPoint screens, but what would those actually look like on the devices in the hands of the children? So one of my first things to do before September is to be utterly ruthless. Make sure that everything's cleared down. We're switching off. We actually had school closure pages in place anyway. We had those. Do you remember when the beast from the east was the only thing we had to worry about? But we actually had school closure pages in place, ready to go then. But we do need to do a lot of clearing out. And then step 2 really is to be prepared. We've got actual inset time planned in September for people to start to look at the online learning space as well as all of the physical spaces. I mean, maybe we're not looking at fire and flood and radiation, but we do need to think about how our systems will cope in the next academic year. It's important, I think, when we're planning the curriculum moving forward, that we need to think about what will work if we have to go back online and what will work if we're going face to face. There are some topics which I'd only like to do in the classroom, and so it's important that we prioritise teaching those. But there are some things that we can do online. But one of the plans that we're working through with our heads of faculty now is to make sure that that curriculum planning is agile enough to be able to switch between the two different systems. We certainly, one of the things that we found with the staff is that they like to present the big picture. They like to present everything on screen, all of the lessons, here's the whole topic, here's the whole unit. But we found very quickly that the students got very confused about that. And maybe the audience for that big picture stuff isn't all of the children. Maybe the audience for that are parents or other teachers. So again, one of the things that we're looking at for September is that the things that are there online, ready to go, are small learning experiences, small learning episodes that are very clearly signposted and which have some really consistent instructions. Again, one of the things I found is that staff, as time went on, their use of some of their language slipped. So they would use a phrase in a notice about a piece of work that didn't quite match with the piece of work that they were sending out, or that was the piece that was in the assignment. And so it's important that we just sort of regroup and regather, really. The DFE have been putting out an awful lot of information in the last few weeks. Some of it has been quite controversial, but towards the end of lockdown, they did actually put out some advice about September, and whether you like it or not, whether you go with it or not. One of the sections was about moving forward. By the end of September, we all have to have systems that offer interaction, assessment and feedback. And those aren't bad things to start with. If you take my presentation away at the end, you'll see that I've actually listed all the ways in which Frog is used in our schools to address all of those things. But it was quite important, and we found out quite early on that there's some staff confidence was quite low, as well as some student confidence. And so if you are going to look for ways of being interactive, if you are going to look for ways of assessing students, the phrase that we worked on was that it was better to do two things really well as a subject than do several things really badly. And so we've spent quite a lot of time working with our heads of faculty, working with SLT to make sure that each faculty, each subject area has got the best ways that work for them online, but that every single person in that faculty is able to do them. And that could be from audio lessons, it could be assessments using Educake or some other online third parties. It could be in terms of returning work through assignments or through shared document spaces, because we also use Teams and we use Microsoft. But I think it's important to have that discussion when you're not actually in that lockdown scenario and you're in that panicking scenario. It's important to have those conversations where you've got a little bit of time and you've got a little bit of flexibility to work on it. Step 4 is very easy, really, and if you type model into Google Images, you just get lots of pictures of supermodels, but I went with Lego. And really step 4 for us is model, 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 because when we do come back in September, and we will have face-to-face contact in September, none of us are quite sure at this point in time how long that contact is going to be before we might be going back into a local lockdown or possibly a bubble closure. So what we are asking our staff to do from September is to really maximise that time in the classroom. We want every teacher, every lesson, every time to model where some of this information is coming from. So rather than allowing staff to open PowerPoints from personal saving areas, we're asking people to go through those learning platforms to keep modelling to students how to get to some of that work. You can experiment with lots of different things. We had some wonderful conversations with students during the lockdown about what was really working for them and what wasn't. But if you've got the chance to experiment, to try setting some work with students before you actually end up in a closure scenario, ask them what works, get them to trial it out. And don't forget to try and enlist the help of your friendly computing department, who I know in our schools, the computing department are working with the Key Stage 3 students in half term 1 to make sure that they all can access everything, to make sure that if they're going to be working on a phone, if they're going to be working on a laptop or an iPad, they're really confident about their online storage, they're really confident about their online file organisation. I do think it's sometimes we get carried away with some of the really able students, and it's actually some of the weaker students that we need to work on. And my step 5 really is about our staff, and I can't emphasise enough how brilliant our staff have been. Those of you who are Pixel schools will recognise PLC as a personalised learning checklist, but I'm old enough to remember when that stood for Professional Learning Community. I have to say our staff have been absolutely brilliant. When we started this, we realised that actually some of our staff skills were things that we needed to address. And we have a digital working group that started very small, really, a few super geeks, if you like, who were happy to try things out, happy to fail and work with students. And their focus has always been on pedagogy. We've never, ever, ever let the tech get in the way of the learning. We challenge ourselves. Our favourite question to each other is, so what? You show me something really fancy and brilliant, the question I'm going to come straight back is, so what? Does that actually help me? Does that actually help the young person with their learning? Our staff were brilliant, absolutely brilliant in taking the courses. And there are lots of courses out there. If you haven't looked at some of the Microsoft Professional Educator, if you haven't looked at the Google stuff, the Apple stuff, there are some superb courses out there, and people were really willing to learn. The mantra became no teacher left behind. Again, our story is on the slides if you want to take this. And at the end of the academic year, certainly the general consensus is that people want to keep this group going. They want to start challenging each other. We'd already started to do this between schools as a cross-trust development area by the end of lockdown, and we want to continue that into half term 1. One of the big things for us at the moment is about assessing the quality of the assessment that's happening. If we're using quizzes, if we're using third-party software, does it really give us the information that we need? Again, we don't want to do things because they're super shiny. We want to do things because they actually mean something to the children. So that leaves us back where we are at our final reiteration as well. What's the next wheel going to look like? I have absolutely no idea. I don't think any of us do. But I do know that I've got some amazing, amazing staff who will work and to move heaven and earth for our students. I know we've got some amazing students who will really come on this journey with us. And I know that we've got mechanisms in place, and we've got agreements, and we've got principles in place that means that we can adapt. We've already proved that we can do it. I'm sure we can do it again. We've got the willingness to do it, and now we've got even more expertise to do it. So moving into September, no teacher left behind, no child left behind, and more importantly, just to make sure that the learning stays relevant, makes it stay fun, and really keeps it together for the kids, which is what we're all here for in the first instance. So those are my 5 steps, my journey moving forward.